What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I'm your host, Ryan Harris. Lots to talk about today. The NFL draft, two more players in the portal, and let's talk about Markus Allen. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your first listen every day. Really do appreciate you tuning in as we talk Badgers every single day. So thank you for the grind. Thank you for joining us. If you're on the YouTube, if you're joining on the podcast, whatever it is, thank you so much. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Let's get right into it. First of all, I want to apologize. I didn't get a show up Monday. I'm battling a cold. If anyone out there has kids, they are walking weapons of mass destruction from a biological standpoint. They are incredible and amazing and the greatest thing ever, but it's germ warfare. So fell victim once again to my children's biological attacks, but I'm getting better. And like Keeanu Benton, I try not to miss any reps. So let's just get right into it. I want to start here. Marshall Howe. So the quarterback that surprised everybody, I talked about on this podcast, the guy who rose to number 3 on the depth chart, the walk-on, surpassed Nick Evers, the feel-good story. He's in the portal, right? So, and listen, I think when the news first dropped, people were a little surprised, but I think when you just take one step back and look at it, it makes so much sense, right? So let's start from the beginning with Marshall Howe, right? Walk-on quarterback, unheralded prospect out of Connecticut, never really had much of a recruitment. And then he came to Wisconsin, right? Had the crisp year. And then this year under Longo, he really started to put together in spring. And he was the number 3 quarterback. He looked good. I thought he looked really composed at the launch when we were able to see him play. He's drawn really high reviews for his football IQ, his ability to understand what's going on. And I actually think his high school tape was kind of fun too. I think he was a little underrated out of high school. But long term, he really didn't have a path to be a starter here. I've talked about how excited I was for him because it's a fun story, but B, I thought it added quarterback depth in the room. And that's always important. You always want to have more quarterback depth than less quarterback depth. There's seasons where multiple quarterbacks get hurt. So having more people in there that understand the offense, I think is a good thing. But long-term, from his perspective, you're starting to look at Nick Evers is here, Braden Locke's here, Metoyer's coming in 24. You still have Cole LaCrue. And you know Longo's going to keep adding talent at that spot. He never really had a path to start here. So I think if you go zoom out a little bit and you look at it from his perspective, he's put some tape on, or put some film, on tape. Had a really good spring. He has a little bit of of buzz around his name right now, right? There's programs and schools that will at least be familiar with the fact that he, jumped Nick Evers, that he looked good, that he climbed the depth chart at Wisconsin under a quarterback whisperer. Like, it makes sense for him now if he wants to pursue football, if he wants to maybe go fight for a little bit more of a legitimate starting chance, it makes sense to now, put your name in the portal and go find that spot where you have a path, maybe towards starting, maybe towards playing time. So I get it from his perspective. I think it makes a ton of sense. I certainly wish him a ton of success. I don't know if it's going to be at this level. Like, he may not be the Power 5 guy, but maybe at a MAC school. And there's a long history of, There's a long history of really talented quarterbacks playing in non-Power 5 locations who carve out not just a great career, but go on and play in the NFL. So I think that might be his goal. It makes sense. This is the time to do it, coming off a really good spring. So all the best to him. Long term, I don't think it really impacts Wisconsin much, but I do think it creates a weird, potentially interesting thing this year where your short-term depth is impacted. Right, because let's say Nick Evers continues to potentially struggle picking up the offense. Cole LaCrue's dealing with injuries. He was your number 3 this year, and we've seen potentially Marshall Howe. There's a long way to go, but Marshall Howe was potentially your number 3 this year at quarterback, and we've seen seasons where the top 2 guys go down. So I think short term, your short term depth takes a bit of a hit, but big picture, not a big deal for Wisconsin. I don't think Longo's going to keep stacking talent, and I hope he goes out and crushes it somewhere. Definitely rooting for Mr. Howe. This one happened a couple days ago, but it happened over the weekend. It happened on the heels of me talking about Avion Jones and Al Ashford. Corey Light also entered the portal. So that's your third cornerback kind of leaving in the mass exodus. Not overly broken up about it, but I do think the depth chart is frankly a little terrifying coming into this year, right? And I thought it was interesting when Luke Fickell came in, and one of their initial pushes was obviously to add to the defensive back room. They added like 5 or 6 kids in the recruiting class. Jonas DeCluna came in, Braden Moore came in, JT Taylor is still there, Jace Arnold was a Chris guy, but they retained him. Amari Snowden, right? So they made a giant push. Jason Maitre. I don't think they really liked what they had in the room, at least beyond the Alexander Smith types. I don't think they liked it. I think they brought in a bunch of numbers. And I think the numbers that they brought in, well, we've seen the numbers that they brought in kind of climb that depth chart, right? So this is the result of it. You're going to lose guys like Akori. You're going to lose guys like Ashford. You're going to lose guys like Avion Jones. But the end result of that is your depth, especially your experience depth, is razor thin at this point. Right? You look back to last year, Alexander Smith missed almost half the year with injury. Cedric Dort and Cedric Dort, I forget the other one. I'm blanking on his name, but there were multiple cornerbacks that were hurt last year for the Badgers, and you just can't have that this year, right? Because there's no established depth behind him. Now, Jace Arnold and Jonas DeCluna are both true freshmen. They both got to campus early. By the way, how big is that you got those two bodies in here and they're able to get reps and already start building depth, because that's your 2 deep right now. Those 2 dudes are in your 2 deep, and they're going to be needed this year unless the Badgers can go out and add somebody in the portal. They've been talking to Antonio Carter a lot. He's the 6'1", kind of 200-pound kid out of Rhode Island. That's going to be a tough battle to win, y'all. Oklahoma's in on him. He's still got a visit to Iowa coming up. He's visited Ole Miss. He's visited the Badgers. He spoke highly about Wisconsin, but that is a stacked recruiting battle. And when you see the physical measurements, of course it is. Experienced corner, 6'1", good size. He's a commodity. And if Wisconsin can land him or someone equivalent to him in the portal, it'd be absolutely enormous, because we talk about injury insurance a lot on this show, right? Do you have the depth to insure yourself against injuries at certain positions? That doesn't mean you have a 5-star ready to come off the bench, that can step in and you lose nothing, but you can have catastrophic effects if you lose a starter, right? That's where Ohio State is always better than us. We don't have the depth to go into a game like that and lose a Joe Schobert or lose a Michael Caputo, right? We saw that. We've seen that in big games where the Badgers drop somebody and everything falls apart because they don't have the depth to go in and replace that guy. I think that's kind of where we're at cornerback right now. Unless we can pick up a graduate transfer, it's a shallow spot. Now, help is coming. Amari Snowden will be here in the fall. AJ Tisdale will be here in the fall. I've talked a lot about Amari Snowden, right? He's framed like a werewolf. I love him. I think he's an elite type of athlete that Wisconsin doesn't get much of, but I also think he's more of a safety type. I know people have disagreed with me on that. I just historically, not many 6'3" guys are playing cornerback, right? It's just a very hard thing to ask of somebody. Now, if you can be, that'd be great. But I think what this does do, this exodus of corners, I think it kind of cements the fact that he's starting at cornerback. And maybe that was already cemented, but I think it does now. So he's coming in at corner. AJ Tisdale's here. And it also makes me think of a guy like maybe a JT Taylor, right? An athlete out of Illinois in last year's class. Maybe he's potentially a big corner. Maybe they look at him and say the safety depth is really strong. AJ Taylor is a really good athlete, long arms, good frame. He can really run well. Maybe he could be a bit of a boundary corner if they think they need a little more depth there. So definitely something to watch. Look in the portal. The Badgers absolutely need another corner there. They're after them. The depth is not quite where it needs to be, but also expect some of the new additions to step in and help if they can. And that's it. I mean, that's the latest with the portal. The Badgers, honestly, big picture, we saw Michigan lose, Peyton Thorne. I mean, we've seen schools lose really big pieces to the portal. Overall, Wisconsin really wasn't ravaged, not nearly as much as people thought with the new coaching staff coming in. So I think that should give everybody a boost of confidence with the new coach, with the culture. I think it's working, because if it wasn't, you would see a lot more impactful guys jump into the portal. Like, I didn't even really mean to go on this tangent, but what is the most impactful guy that Wisconsin lost in the portal? Right? I mean, think about it. So, yeah, I think that the culture seems strong with the new coach, the new staff. I think they've done it the right way. Wisconsin wasn't hit as hard in the portal as we thought they would be, but they definitely need to go out and get in our corner. All right, coming up, let's talk NFL draft, where the players went, and also take a snapshot back at what the recruitment was like. Do stars really matter? Let's talk about who was drafted where and look at their recruitments. Coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you, as always, by our good friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now is a great time because the NBA playoffs are going on. So make a fast break. Head over there to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. because right now new customers, and I've talked about this, get you no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. One of the things I'm on, I've talked about it. The Suns, they look great in game one against Denver, but money line is you can do great. You get great odds right now on the money line for Phoenix to win this series. That's where I'm going. Get promotions every day with FanDuel. The app is incredibly easy, safe, secure to use. Get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And as always, I want to thank everybody so sincerely and so much for jumping on the show, for sticking with us as we build this community. Y'all are amazing. Really, really do appreciate all the everydayers that are here every single day grinding Badgers with us. So jump in the community, join the Discord, leave comments, reach out to me if you want to jump on the show. I've got a couple of people I need to get back to. I want to get you on the show. So let me know if you want to get involved in the community even more. Send me a DM. I read everything. I'm very appreciative of it. All right, let's talk the Badgers draft. The draft just wrapped up this last weekend. Badgers had 3 players drafted. One undrafted free agent is also signed. Let's just start at the top. Joe Tippman, 2nd round, 43rd overall, went to the Jets. I think it's a good spot for him. I think that's about where he's projected. Big time athletic center. Obviously, everyone here is familiar with Joe Tippman's game. Going to be snapping potentially Aaron Rodgers. How wild is that for a Wisconsin guy to be drafted out to the East Coast, and then your first quarterback in the NFL that you might be snapping to is Aaron Rodgers? I only say might, not because of Aaron Rodgers, but I want to see where Tippman is on the Jets line. I did hear somebody say they thought that he might be a guard for them. I think he's a center, but I'm not a Jets guy, so I don't want to go out on a limb there. But 43rd overall, highest drafted Badger this year, kind of adding to that line, that lineage of Wisconsin offensive linemen that have been picked. And if you go back to his recruitment, that was a 4-star composite player, right? 2019, 4-star player, the number 6 player overall in the state of Indiana. A good recruiting list. I think Wisconsin beat Iowa for him. I think Notre Dame was at least interested in him. So again, there's a trend, right? The stars do matter. It's not everything. Nothing is ever everything, but the stars matter. A 4-star player, Wisconsin's highest drafted player this year. Very excited for him. I think he's going to crush it there. Continuing on the 2nd round, Keeanu Benton, number 49 overall to the Steelers. He was a mid 3-star guy, and a bunch of Steelers, by the way, a bunch of Badgers for the Steelers. Obviously, Loudermilk's there, Watt's there. They picked Herbig. So there's definitely a Badger connection there as well. He was a mid 3-star player, the number 5 player in state that year. Just an Ironman. I will always be fond of Keeanu Benton for his ability to just step in and, man, one of the most unheralded positions on defense, right? Go play nose guard. Go get 3 sacks and get doubled 55% of the time, and just take a beating and open up holes for, open up room for the linebackers that get all the glory. I'll always be grateful to Benton. A heck of a Badger. Here's an interesting one. So he was the 5th ranked in-state kid that year, and I think it was 2018. Was he at 19? I'm trying to remember. But he was the 5th ranked Badger in-state high school prospect in the state of Wisconsin that year. Here's the 5 that were above him, the 4 that were above him. Julius Davis, kind of a bust. Leo Chanel, obviously a total dude. Deshaun Brown. Does anybody remember Deshaun Brown? I remember the recruitment. Wisconsin kind of cooled on him. It felt like there was some off-field stuff. He went to Indiana. I didn't know this. I had to go look up Deshaun Brown because sometimes when players leave the state, they kind of go out of sight, out of mind for me, and I stopped paying attention. Deshaun Brown made no impact at Indiana. Went to the portal, and then recently just got arrested for robbery, attempted kidnapping. He basically lured a guy into his house under the guise of a dating app, held him at knife point, put a bag over his head, made him drive to an ATM, punched him in the face, crazy stuff. So that was the number 3 player in the state that year. Number 4 was Jake Karczynski. He went to Iowa, hasn't made much of an impact there. And then number 5 was our boy, Keeanu Benton. So it's always interesting to look back. It's not like, nobody has a crystal ball when these things happen and you never know what will go on. But the Badgers seem to make the right call with Deshaun Brown in terms of at least distancing there. Because I do remember a lot of Badger fans were upset that he was a big-time in-state athlete. Not a lot of athletes like him come out of state, good size, like a receiver type. And he went to Indiana, and the off-field stuff is a very real thing. Let's go round 4. Nick Herbig was picked, 132nd overall, again, to the Steelers. go back to his recruitment. I mean, he was blue chip through and through, 132nd player in the country that year, I believe, 4-star composite player, number 2 player out of Iowa, or out of Hawaii, sorry. So again, stars matter, right? 2 of the Badgers drafted players this year were composite 4-stars. It's not everything. It's not the be all end all, but stars do matter. You got to go and win those recruiting battles to get the elite type of athletes that typically get drafted. So Herbig obviously going to the Steelers, big time 4-star talent. Then he had one undrafted free agent. That was Tyler Beach. He was a I would say he's a high 3-star guy. He wasn't quite a 4-star guy, but he was in that 87, 88 range. He went to the Houston Texans as an undrafted free agent. Beach was interesting to me because he was a guy who I think we had higher hopes for him. I thought a lot of people thought he would develop as a tackle, as a draft pick. It never really happened. And then he obviously came back and moved to guard under Bob Bostad. We thought that would maybe trigger something for him. He not great in space, but he's a pretty good run blocker. We thought that would maybe, and it never really came together, but obviously rooting for him to have success, rooting for all these guys to have success. So 3 players drafted, 1 undrafted free agent. That's not a really deep undrafted free agent class. Usually you see 3 or 4 Badgers get kind of signed up somewhere, and some of that can still happen, but there's not a lot of obvious candidates left out there. I did very quickly in my head look at next year, right? And you start looking at this. Next year could be an interesting draft year for the Badgers, right? Let's say Mordecai blows up, has a good year. Braylon Allen is an interesting one. I think Nelson. I think Renfro's a possibility, right? I think Bortolini. Certainly you have a couple defensive linemen if they take a step up. Muma, Alexander Smith, Hunter Wohler if he blows up this year. That's a lot of what ifs, right? And it's a lot of things that have to go right and click, and a lot of players that have to stay healthy. But I think you could see pretty easily 5, 6, 7 Badgers picked next year. Now, not all in the first round, not all in the second round, not all in the third round. Like Mordecai could be like a 6th round guy, right? Braylon Allen could be a 3rd-ish round guy. But I'm interested. I'm going to put together a bigger list, and I want to get y'all's take on that. Who do you think, because Wisconsin hasn't had a first-round pick in a minute here, who on this roster is most likely to break that streak? If Wisconsin has a first-round pick, who will it be? Curious to see what you guys think on that. I need to think about it a little bit as well. All right, coming up, we're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show. Then we're going to talk about Markus Allen. Arrested. What does it mean for him? What does it mean for the roster, the receiver depth chart? Let's talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. I want to say thank you again for tuning in. I really do appreciate everybody that's tuned into this. News broke a couple days ago that Markus Allen, receiver for the Badgers, and listen, there's been so much kind of weird smoke and energy with Markus Allen anyway. This is just kind of piling onto that. And I'm pretty sure this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But Markus Allen was arrested, public intoxication. Sorry. He was at a Mifflin Street party, the block party. And then there's also reports that he was arrested and found with a stolen gun. Now, I haven't read a ton into this because, quite frankly, I would like more details to come out. I want to see what the report actually says. I want to see if the police update their story. I don't want to come on and really talk too deeply about the details of it. But I think we can safely say this is the end of Markus Allen in Madison, right? Regardless of what happens, regardless of what details come out, regardless of, where this goes further, this is a bad look. This is a bad look for anybody. Okay, let's be super clear. This is a bad look for anybody. You want players on your team to be responsible. You want players on your team to not get arrested for public intoxication and potentially have a stolen gun on them. But there's something that I've always kind of realized, and this isn't new. This isn't like some genius code I cracked, but your talent has to outweigh your distractions, right? And that's not a sports thing. People always talk about athletes can get away with this if they're really good. That's in everything. That's everything, right? Do you think the best salesman at a car dealership has more rope than the guy who can't sell a Miata to anybody? Of course he does, right? That dude can probably come in hungover a couple days. That dude can probably not show up to work one day because he's moving inventory, right? The best coder at Google, the best guy software developer there. You don't think he has a little more leeway than the guy who's pushing a coffee cart around? They probably have AI to push their coffee carts around, but of course he does. And in the case of Markus Allen, you're looking at this depth chart, right? And we talked about it so much. You're like, no. You're getting 5, 6, 7. You're getting 7 deep before you even mention Markus Allen, right? I mean, I think that's probably accurate. You have the 3 from last year: CJ Williams, Pauling, Burrows. That's already 6. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Oh, Vinny Anthony, Chris Brooks, Tretch is coming. I'm at 9. I think those 9 are already ahead of Markus Allen. And then you got arrested. see, again, I don't want to minimize the fact. I don't want to try to promote the fact that you can do whatever you want if you're talented, but there is a connection there. We all know there is. The really good players, the really good employees, the really good at whatever you are, you get more rope than the people that are ninth on the depth chart. And then you add to the fact that he didn't really elevate himself in spring. You add to the fact that he quit on the team last year, that he committed to the Gophers and then backed back out. I think that's it. I just don't see any path forward here. Now, Wisconsin will, I'm sure, do their due diligence as they should, right? I think that's smart. I don't expect any rash decision, but I would be stunned if he's on the roster in the fall. And it's just such a shame, right? It's such a shame because this is a really talented player. I remember when we got him from Michigan. He decommitted from Michigan. He gives you a bigger, more physical body type that's unique. We saw the flashes on the field. And you hate to see any athlete, any player, any young person, because these are still young people. I was not, again, not making any excuse here. I was not the most mature version of myself when I was 21, 22, 23. And you just hate to see people make choices and decisions that negatively impact them, right? Like there's a good chance he looks back at that and he understands like that's a mistake. Shouldn't have done that. But it's going to have real life consequences. He might have already been out the door anyway. Let's be real, because the depth chart is what the depth chart is. Wisconsin needs scholarships. They're looking at a transfer corner. I think they'll find scholarships if they need it, but it's a little easier to take a guy who isn't in the plans and now is messing up. He's getting in trouble off the field. He's 8th, 9th on the receiver depth chart. I think that's it. I think the writing's already been on the wall, and now the writing has been like imprinted into the wall, right? That's it. So that's the show today. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Tomorrow, we're going to continue talking about our depth chart update, our stock up, stock down. We did the offense positions coming out of spring workout, defense positions. Look for John Garcia later this week to jump on as always. Also have a show coming up with talking about the new hockey coach, get a couple people on that know much more about hockey than I am. A lot of content coming up. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in on Wisconsin, and let's talk tomorrow.